In 1961, newly elected President John F. Kennedy set an audacious goal for our country: send a manned mission to the moon and return the astronauts safely to Earth by the end of the decade. Despite long odds, NASA was able to achieve this goal, uniting the world as TV cameras beamed the mission back to Earth. All this month, PBS will be featuring a number of special programs celebrating the moon landing. A new 3-part American experience called Chasing the Moon will begin this coming Monday night. And here to tell the Apollo story is Astro Bob King, astronomer, photographer, and author from Duluth. And Bob, always good to have you here.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming into the studio. Bob, when President Kennedy made that speech back in 1961, sending a manned mission to the moon really did seem like an impossible dream, didn't it?
Oh, it was, yes. I mean, it truly was audacious. But I think the fact that we were beaten by the Russians in 2 big ways. They got the first satellite up, Sputnik 1, back in 1957 in October. And then even worse, in terms of America's image, was Yuri Gagarin, the first astronaut, orbited the Earth in the spring of 1961. And that, I think, provided the backdrop that really kicked things into high gear.
We would have no more of that. We're not going to get beaten again. But
exactly.
Bob, are we still in a space race of sorts or not? Not anymore. Things have changed.
There's a lot more cooperation now. A lot more countries are in space, like China and India. And certainly the Russians are still too.
Sure.
So there's more cooperation, but there still is that kind of that underlying competition too, that fuels continual exploration and new projects.
Take us back to your personal memories of Apollo 11.
Boy, that was a wonderful time for me. That was on July 20th, 1969. I was downstairs. I was watching TV. Just had a black and white set on. And I had my camera set up on a tripod to photograph the TV set.
Go figure.
Yeah, I figured I needed to capture this great historical moment. And so it was so important to me that I set that up. And doggone it, I can't find those pictures anymore. They must be somewhere. So I photographed the whole thing. And then, of course, I tracked them as they went out to the moon and stayed up and followed all the missions, actually.
Are we still as excited about the space race, or do you think things have calmed down? There are so many other large issues in the world today that we're facing.
I think we are not fully united like we were back then. Back then we had a common purpose and goal, and that was to excel at space and to be the first on the moon. And it sort of has fanned out into a variety of different missions now. Manned and unmanned missions. But I still think there's a great deal of interest in space. I see it all the time from people, especially when I'm teaching classes. They love learning about space missions. And there are so many of them. It's quite unbelievable. I can spend hours and hours because of all of the different countries participating.
And you are a bit of a scholar on the Apollo 11 mission. We do have some pictures, and why don't we get those up on the screen?
Great
and maybe you
idea.
could just kind of walk us through that experience for people who may not have the memory or the knowledge of what happened.
Sounds great. There they are.
This is the crew.
The crew. There's the moon rising behind them. That's Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins, and Buzz Aldrin there from left to right. Of course, Neil was the pilot, and Michael was the pilot of the command service module in space around the moon. And here's the liftoff. Oh, I love this vehicle. This is the lunar landing module, and this is how they got to the surface of the moon. It reminds me of a little bug or almost a virus. It was nothing like we expected to get to the moon back in the 50s with giant rocket ships. Instead, this is the perfect craft to land 2 people on the moon. And there we have, I believe, I can't remember if that's Buzz or if that's Neil, but that's from the Apollo 11 mission there. And there's the flag. And of course, they use sort of people say, well, I saw the flag flapping, but there's no wind on the moon. What's going on there?
Yeah.
And what it is that there's sort of a rod at the top that stiffens the flag. And as they pounded it into place, it flapped back and forth just through its own movement.
And it still stands.
That does not stand.
That does not stand. They bring it back?
No, they did not. Can you imagine? Let's stop the craft, get out and grab it. No, what happened was when the ascent stage lifted off to bring them back into the orbit, the thrust of the fuel blew that flag down. In future Apollo landings, they moved the flag further. So that those should still be standard.
Sure.
Are there any details of the mission that really stand out in your head as you've studied it?
Yes, there are so many. But one stands out. When Neil was getting off the ladder, he had a couple of things he had to do. He had to get panoramic shots. He had to take a contingency sample, put it in a bag in his little knee pad here, or pouch, and then also get the TV camera, that uncoiled and set into place. And you can watch this on YouTube, where you can see the whole his whole stepping out onto the moon. He spent so much time taking panoramas that you can hear Houston, Mission Control, saying, "Neil, don't forget that contingency sample."
Really?
Twice they asked him. He says, "Don't worry, I'm getting around to it. I want to get the panoramas done." So,
Bob, will space travel in the future be more robotic than human?
a lot of people would prefer it that way because there's less danger involved.
And certainly
it's also
great
less
distances.
expensive. And great distances, and radiation hazards at those great distances. Because those are all being worked on for a future Mars mission, as well as future missions to the moon.
But we're pretty well locked into near space more than far space, aren't we?
Well, it all depends. The current administration, their program, they'd like to see NASA have a spacecraft, or a space station, I should say, called the Gateway in lunar orbit by 2024, and the next moon landing called Artemis on the surface of the moon that same year. And that's coming up very quickly. Whether or not there's the money and time to do it is unknown, but that is the current mission. And then from there to Mars.
Sure.
There are a number of capitalists out there who have been talking about lunar tourism. What do you think of that idea? And would you, if you had the money, would you be online to go?
Of course I would. I would love to be a lunar tourist. I would, I'm hoping that in my lifetime, however many years I have left, that there'll be enough time that maybe I can get into a suborbital flight just to get up there.
It would be fun.
That might be possible. Maybe affordable. So for the younger people watching, you have your shot at the moon.
Why is space exploration still important today, do you think?
Well, I would say right off the top of my head, for the knowledge gained, for the wonder, for the sheer joy of exploration, for not knowing where you're going to go. When you take on a project like President Kennedy wanted us to do back in '61, it just led not only to our exploring the moon, but also to incredible advances in electronics, microcomputing. The camera on the moon itself, they had to make it so small, it cost millions of dollars. They had to make it so small and do everything just a certain way. It quickly led to the invention of the camcorder. And then the computer aboard the Apollo 11 lander also was crucial in kind of advancing us towards microelectronics and cell phones that we now, it was all part of that progress. So much comes with it that you cannot predict. Plus the wonder, people love exploring. There's something built into our genetics that we want to wander and see what's around the next corner. And I think that's what space exploration does for us.
Bob, why do you think we haven't been back to the moon in so many years?
Oh, that is such a great question. Well, after the lunar landings, because a lot of money and time had been put in, and a lot of people thought, we're done, why keep going? But of course, scientists wanted to keep going to the moon as many times as possible. But there was not the political will and neither the money. So it was put into different ventures, the space station, space shuttle, and so on. I think there has just been a buildup over time of getting beyond Earth orbit, because that's where we have invested so many hours and so many years. And seeing what else is out there and going back to the moon is a natural step. And of course, using that knowledge and that experience to get to a mission to Mars. And then who knows from there? One of NASA's latest plans is to send a drone, like a little miniature helicopter, to Saturn's moon, Titan,
right,
and fly around the moon. This just came out in the news this week.
It did.
Yeah, and I thought, well, that's a heck of a great idea. I'd love to be a drone pilot on that. I've still got a couple of weeks left on my license, too.
What about the potential for mineral values?
Oh yeah,
moon rocks,
and I should have brought that up. Moon rocks, of
Yeah.
course. Yeah, the moon is out there for mining. As far as if you want to mine it, there's things that you can get from the surface that would be very useful: minerals, rare metals, and so forth. So that is potentially a use for the moon. Not one I'm excited about. I'm Mr. Exploration, but done properly. that is certainly a potential. And as humanity expands moves into space, we hope,
Yeah.
we're going to be needing to get materials from other places.
Even 50 years later, Bob, aren't we still in infancy?
Oh, absolutely. And that's the thing. It seems like, oh, wow, we've spent this much money and gone this year. When you look at the whole of human history, 50 years is just
Nothing,
a
is
click on the top, just
Yeah.
like that. So we're only beginning, and we've done incredibly well at this point. And I think we need to take that momentum and just keep building and going with it.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, Astro Bob King, thank you for coming in. Maybe this will spark some new interest in space.
Well,
and
I
space
hope so.
exploration.
Always fun to have you here, Bob.
Oh, it's always
thank
it's wonderful to
Thank
be here.
you.
Thank you.
Good to have you.